afternoon, everyone, for folks on the East Coast anyway. I'm Zach Shulman, class of 87, law 1990. I know many of you, but in case you don't know me, I'm the director of a program at Cornell called Entrepreneurship at Cornell, or as we like to say, E at C. Thank you for joining us today for our latest webinar. You might recall when COVID first hit, we wanted to continue giving you access to firsthand stories with top entrepreneurs, even if we couldn't get together in person. Our new online series has allowed us to reach further than ever for both speakers and attendees. And by the way, the webinars have been really well received. Today, we have speakers from both coasts of the US. I'm really glad and thrilled to be joined by the Joseph Silbert Dean of Engineering, that's a mouthful, Lynden, here at Cornell, Lynden Archer, who I've known for a long time, Lynden's in Ithaca, and also Amy Bunszel, class of 89, so we overlapped a little bit, Amy. She's the Executive Vice President, Architecture, Engineering, and Construction Design Solutions at Autodesk, and she's in California. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Today's program is brought to you by Entrepreneurship at Cornell, the Cornell Entrepreneur Network, the College of Engineering, of course, and Cornell Silicon Valley. You can learn more about all these organizations in the links that will be showing up in the chat box momentarily. The format for today is the same as always. It's going to be a fireside chat conversation with some Q&A. We'll be weaving the questions in that were submitted in advance. I have a long list, and also taking your questions live. Please put your questions into the chat box and address them to all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see what you're asking. Last, we are recording the program so you can view it again later. You can view it both on the CEN live stream channel as well as the E at C YouTube channel. And you can also see all the previous episodes from this series on those links as well. We'll pop those links into the, I see them already. Oh, we're getting close. We'll pop them into the chat in just a second. So let's get started. Lynden will take things away, and Amy, and I'll jump in with questions as we move forward. So Lynden's as always, great to have you with us. And Amy, thanks so much for joining. Lynden's all yours.
All right, Zach, thank you. And Amy, thanks for being such a good sport and for giving us a little bit of your time. I'm really looking forward to the next few minutes with you, asking some of the burning questions on my mind about your own sort of outstanding career. And hopefully in the process, learning a little bit for myself and obviously getting some of the questions that our audience has on their mind answered. So look, I spent a lot of time listening, reading, Amy, about the great stuff you've done. And there's a quotation that jumps out at me from an interview I think you did in 2020 in Athena Alliances, their newsroom. And it basically says, along the way, I took a lot of risks. If you're operating in your comfort zone all the time, you're not learning, stretching, or growing. And I want to use that perspective as a bit of a backdrop, the first start to the beginning, to tell me a little bit about what attracted you to Cornell. When did you know that you wanted to pursue the career path that you are on right now?
Thank you. And thank you, Lynden, and thank you, Zach, and welcome everyone. So, for me, I was, in high school, I was really good at math and science. I had a guidance counselor who somehow was able to connect the dots for me and suggested I go into electrical engineering. And, back in the day, we had those big, 500-page books about, colleges that you could look through, no internet to help us out with that. And ended up spending an overnight weekend at Cornell as one of the applicant programs, and really just fell in love with, what I could see of the culture and the student body there. And, I grew up on Long Island, so it wasn't too big of a risk in terms of flying across the country or anything, but it was certainly a lot of new experiences for me up on campus.
And so talk to me a little bit, Amy, right? So I always enjoy speaking to alumni because I think there's a general distillation of the experiences we offer, in terms of what really actually matters in terms of the person's trajectory. And I just want to get a sense for, from you, for how your Cornell journey prepared you first to be an entrepreneur and co-founder of Lynden Technologies, and subsequently your post-acquisition role at Autodesk.
I think for me, one of the great things was it felt like anything was possible, at Cornell. You could take, whatever kind of classes you wanted to take. You could explore different interests. I had a work study job. I also was active in my sorority, and I was active in Society of Women Engineers and the IEEE. So I had a packed experience. And so learning how to juggle multiple priorities and grow as an individual. And I tell people a lot about my Cornell experience really taught me how to be a good decision maker and a good prioritizer. And, for the rest of my career, I don't practice electrical engineering anymore. It's been a long time since I did any of that, but the leadership skills I learned, the interpersonal skills I learned, the ability to influence, time manage, all those things really formed me into the leader that I am today.
Now, awesome. So we're going to sort of fast forward a lot, right? And, you and I have talked about my own sort of excitement at this, to me, emergent, but it might be that it's still already old news, concept in industry where established companies essentially buy innovation. And there, obviously lots of challenges with that, right? There's an engine that creates the innovation in the first place, that gets acquired by a large, business juggernaut, and managing cultures and so forth is quite interesting. And so I wanted, I know you did that, and you're an example of someone who have excelled actually in that domain. So I want to, just probe you, on a couple of things that are on my mind. And so first of all, when you think about, this balance between, building capability in-house versus buying a company with that capability, I mean, what are some of the considerations that you bring to the table there?
So there are a lot. And as a software company, we have a lot of engineers that think they can build anything, and they can, but they can't always build it in, the time you need to build something in a particular market, or we may not have the expertise. For example, we just did an acquisition of a software company that has deep domain expertise in water and water infrastructure. And they have an incredible portfolio that we have now been able to integrate with Autodesk. And that was a situation where build was not an option. Buy was the only way we would really get into that. The other thing we do is we look at partnering. So sometimes we'll partner with a company or invest in a company, and sort of, I think of that as dating sometimes. And then we can figure out, is there a good culture fit? Is this technology we think, is the right technology for us to integrate? Are these people that can be successful at Autodesk? Will we be able to scale the business? So we look for those, synergies when we're looking to acquire something. And sometimes it does mean we bring in some technology and we have to, we stop doing something within Autodesk that might have been similar or maybe the same, but the company is bringing us something that's going to get us there faster.
Very nice. Well, look, so the idealist in me, listening to what you just said, can see two other types of challenges, perhaps opportunities, right? On the one hand, I'm a founder of two startups, and both companies are incredibly creative. And it sort of pains me to even think that creativity could be lost in an exit situation, right? And so how do you balance the need to give the acquired company flexibility and space to grow, to achieve their goals, with what I think could be the equally important need, right? To basically merge the cultures for ultimate win-win outcomes for the organization.
Yes. So this really all revolves around your approach to integrating the acquisition. And so we don't take a one size fits all. We really look at each acquisition and we try to understand like what's the value that we think we can create together, and really do that as a partnership. It's terrible if like we were to assume after the due diligence, we had all the answers and we knew exactly what to do, because those are short, bursts of activity with the new company. And we really need to sit down and come up with that strategic plan together. And if part of the purpose for the acquisition was really to incubate this technology, then we need to put them in a organizational design that allows them to continue doing that, but also benefit from some of what Autodesk can bring to the table as well. And then we have to check in, because this stuff is hard, really hard.
I could imagine. And so in fact, you sort of queued me up nicely there, because I imagine there are some great success stories that everyone likes to tell, but I assume the failures, one can learn as much from them. Are there any nice failure stories you can tell us in that space?
There is one area where we felt probably about 10 or 15 years ago that all of the new consumer, like B2C type software, was going to have a big impact on Autodesk's commercial solutions for professionals. So we started investing and buying up companies that were more in the consumer B2C space. And it was sort of an experiment. I would say it didn't go very well. It turned out that these things were very different animals, and we were never able to figure out how to really cross the chasm that was between them, with one notable exception. There's this amazing product called, two products. One is called Instructables. It's a website you can go to for all sorts of content to create things that's all crowdsourced. And the other one is Tinkercad. And Tinkercad is an amazing 3D kind of building block design solution for sort of elementary school kids that really gets them on the road to STEM. And we have, I can't remember, it's way more than 5 million users of the software, I should know. So that was a really happy success, but we spent a lot of money on other things that didn't turn out quite as well.
But look, so I'm as interested in the process, actually, right? I'm thinking for the entrepreneurs in the audience, like me, where one wants to get the attention, actually, of a big company. So how does that happen? I mean, is that like trade conferences, websites? I mean, how does a small company that is in your space innovating in ways that that company might see are complementary to your business goals, how do they get the attention of an Autodesk?
So a couple different things happen. There's many different routes. Sometimes the company's brought to our attention by their investors. We bought a company in Tel Aviv once that Sequoia actually brought to our attention because they were doing something really in our space, and it made sense for us to know about them. We do have an M&A team that is constantly scouting, looking for, looking at our strategies and then looking at kind of what's out there in the market. We all watch the, investor newsletters to see, who's investing in what. I get cold calls, through LinkedIn and otherwise, and I do pay attention because you never know what's out there. And then one of the best ways, though, and this is how Autodesk found my company, was if a customer of ours, we have a joint customer, and the customer says, "Hey, Autodesk, we think you should look at this technology because it's going to be, really meaningful for things that are important to my business." And then we have this, you've also got the validation right there that people in your market really care about it.
Hey, Amy, let me jump in for a second. Does Autodesk prefer to acquire early stage companies or late stage companies, or are you agnostic?
We are agnostic. It's different acquiring a business than it is acquiring sort of, technology that's on its way to being a business. Within my organization, just this past year, we acquired a almost 40-year-old company doing water infrastructure with a lot of new products also on the cloud. And then we acquired a startup that was doing generative design, machine learning, all this really cool technology that's going to be a big important part of our future platform. So we do both. And that's why thinking very carefully about how you integrate is important. One, it was important to kind of preserve the customer base and the revenue and, scale the business. The other, it was really important to preserve that innovative spirit and have them continue to, learn quickly and do a lot of experiments.
Yeah, and let me just pop one more in there that relates to that. On the IP side, how does Autodesk approach the acquisitions? I mean, do you look for companies that have patents filed? Do you look for blocking patents, offense, defense, things of that nature on the patent front?
The patents are not as important for us when we're scouting. I think what's important for us is if it helps us deliver value to our customers in a way that's going to be meaningful for, for all of us, the customers and Autodesk. As part of the due diligence, we like to see if a company has, what they've been doing with patents. But if you're a small startup company, it's really hard to run a patent program. So sometimes
it's so expensive.
Yes, it's expensive. It's time consuming. So often what we'll do is, once we get past a certain stage, we'll help, once the company's acquired, we'll start a process to go out and get patents where they should be applied for.
Lynden, I'll turn it back to you for a bit.
Yes, I want to go back a little bit, Amy, because you've now jogged my memory on a couple interesting things, right? So, and I understand that some of this might be hard, and so don't just say no if you can't answer. But I'm just curious about, you came in from outside of Autodesk, and they literally gave you the keys to the biggest car, right? A mothership, right? AutoCAD, and you transformed the thing. Right. So can you talk a little bit about how that happened, if you can?
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, and Amy, when you do that, we had a question in the chat box that said, what was the spark that triggered your passion for building a company and innovating? And this relates to what Lynden just asked as well. So you can weave that in as well if you can. Yeah.
Well, as far as the spark, I think I was young and didn't know any better. And we just went off. We saw this problem. Our company was doing three-dimensional wire harness design, and we saw a problem in a lot of people building industrial machinery, cars, everything, and this was an unsolved problem. So we were in our 20s and we just went off and decided to go, this was the risk part. It's like, there wasn't a lot of careful thought about the risk. It just, anything was possible. So off we went to try and do this. It was challenging because we had to survive the 2003 downturn and some conflict, or 2002, 2003. So it was tough, but again, we just kept kind of moving forward without kind of putting not letting the risk overwhelm us, but really thinking about, what we were learning and trying to do for our customers. When I transitioned to Autodesk, this is another interesting thing. So, mapping the employees of an acquisition into a bigger company is always a challenge, and we don't always get it all right. But we work pretty hard at that. For me, I came in as a product manager. So what was a real benefit for me was I was doing everything except the software development. I was, sales, I was marketing, I was product management, I was training. And so when I came into Autodesk, I was able to focus on, one aspect of, a profession. And there were lots of people there to learn from. So I kind of moved up the ranks in product management. I was responsible for our mechanical design tools for a little while, Inventor. And then Lynden, the AutoCAD job came up, and I was like, wow, this is a huge product with like millions and millions of users. I could have a different kind of impact, on the world in that product. So I raised my hand for the AutoCAD job. And what was exciting for me was the team had kind of did not have a good strategy at the time. This was in 2010, because every time the AutoCAD team wanted to kind of go in a certain direction, there was a different product team at Autodesk that was doing that. So what we had to do was carve out, like, what is AutoCAD uniquely great at? And it's drawing and documentation. And then we really focused on, really that was the core where the product came from. And we have amazing 3D products in manufacturing and amazing electrical products and great AEC products. So we really just focused on, what the product was great at, and it's continued to grow incredibly for the company over the years. But it's that focus of like, why does that product exist, and what is it like born to be great at?
So I'm actually curious, Amy, when that job came up, or when it was open, was it a competitive process? Were they looking outside the company as well?
That's a good piece of career advice for people. It was. They were only looking externally. I think what had happened was, executives sit around and they're like, is there anybody internally who might want this role? And, my name didn't come up. I was living in Portland. I was very happy in my current role. And nobody thought I would move to California or want to make a, change within the company. So if I hadn't raised my hand, which was very uncomfortable, to say, hey, I, not knowing if they would want me, but raise my hand for a role in a different organization, say, hey, I would be interested in learning more about this. That was really hard. But if I hadn't done it, it just wouldn't have happened.
And how long after Autodesk acquired your company did you actually get this new position?
That was about 8 years in. I spent 8 years in Oregon leading a smaller set of products. And so this was probably like a 4x increase in sort of number of customers and scope of business.
Right. But they certainly knew you.
Yes.
Because you were there.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking. She was an insider by then. So it was, It was hardly, the challenge I thought of giving you the keys to that big car.
Yeah.
And you've done remarkably well with it. Look, so the other dimension to this is almost at the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Which is a journey to the boardroom. And you've had some interesting thoughts that I've read about being intentional about, what you do to make that journey possible. So I'm going to leave that sort of as an open-ended starter question. So what are some of the things you did to get prepared for the boardroom? What are some of the bits of advice you would give people in the audience and why they should do those things?
Yeah. So for me, what started to happen was, I'm very happy at Autodesk, but I'm kind of I wanted to make sure I was having a lot of good external experiences that would also influence my ability to, do my role at Autodesk. So I often would get asked if I wanted to go do another startup. And for me, that's an absolute no, thank you. It was amazing, but I love working at scale right now. But I would love to give back, like what I've learned, through my entire journey. And so I started to learn more about board service and realized that, there are so many companies going through transformations, whether it's a digital transformation or a business model transformation, that I thought I could add value in that space. So I looked, I actually leveraged this organization called the Athena Alliance, and I started talking to CEOs. And it takes a while to find a fit because you spend a fair bit of time with the company and the leadership and the board. So that's really important. So I found Pixelworks, which was a great company for me because it leveraged both some of my Autodesk software experience and my semiconductor experience. So I'm a microwave engineer by background and used to work on semiconductors. So it was this very cool fit that really appealed to me in that way.
So what you're telling us is that you're a pure geek? Is that what you're saying to us?
A little bit.
A part geek, yes. So I'm gonna drill a little here because I know that you've said repeatedly that mentors and sponsors are very important along that journey, and I know it's not easy, right? It's a competitive environment. It's one that moves fast. How you cultivate good people to become mentors and sponsors so you can actually ultimately convert that interest in a board seat, action towards it, into an actual seat.
Yeah, there's a lot of trial and error that goes on there. I will say that one of the things I did when I was looking for the board seat was, as I was, going to events or networking, I told everybody that that's what I was looking for. And it felt a little awkward at times, but it often spurred good conversations, or, hey, have you thought about this person? Or can I introduce you to that person? And so it ended up, most people want to help you out. And I would say similarly with mentoring and sponsoring, there's a lot of trial and error, because if you're going to have a mentoring relationship with someone, there needs to be a good chemistry there and some good fit. And so often what I do and what I recommend people do is, have a 15-minute meeting with someone, or, you don't even need, it used to be we would do coffee but really you just find some time where it's easy for people to get together and just share kind of what you're working on and get tips. And sometimes what I do is, if I see a person who I feel I can really help, whether they're the industry they're in, or the if they're product management or some other thing, I'll often just try to check in with people on a periodic basis, because I like giving back. I mean, I've been volunteering my whole life for one thing or another. And so having those kind of things has always been exciting for me to kind of give back to people. But so I would tell people, don't get discouraged, but really work on building up those relationships over time, and then good things will happen. And I'll also say, as far as sponsoring goes, I've been at Autodesk for 18 years now, and building relationships across a company, even if you're only there for a short period of time, is very important, because you just don't know when people will be talking, or leadership will be talking about a particular opportunity or maybe a new assignment, and trying to brainstorm who might be a good candidate. So, but if you have a sponsor in the room there, or people who are familiar with your work, much more likely that your name will come up, maybe from someone outside your direct chain of command. And that has been really helpful for me over the years.
What you just said relates to a question that just popped up in the chat. It says, the question is from Holly. It says, Amy, what are your thoughts on crossing silos between your product lines to improve innovation and collaborations that could occur?
Yes, I think a lot of innovation does happen in the seams between things that you don't see. So we do a few different things that really involve making sure that we've got like cross-functional teams happening across the company. And a lot of these are sort of hard, unsolved customer problems that we need multiple domains involved in. So we do create a lot of call them core teams or initiative teams, where we bring people together who are handpicked from, different parts of the organization to go and address a particular problem. And they often get like an executive sponsor so that we're really kind of paying attention to it. Sometimes it even becomes a corporate goal, because we know if we don't sort of put a lot of light on this challenge, people would just go back to their normal way of doing things. And we want to make sure we support the leaders in doing some of that hard work.
Interesting.
So I was impressed, Amy, that you basically said that's the role I ultimately want, and you said you would repeat it, right? And one of the not so well kept secrets about academia is if you want a job, you say you don't want it, right?
Oh.
It's like the exact opposite of your process, where you and the point is that difference is not really just between sectors. I see it actually as cultures, right? That in some parts of the world, you don't volunteer for the thing you want to do, and somehow that's seen as something that qualifies you for that role. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that balance between hiding that light under the bushel versus telling it.
Yeah, a couple thoughts. It's different when you're looking for a board seat. It's a little different. You kind of have to be very out there and aggressive about it. I would say within your work environment, what I think is great is if people, talk to their managers and say, hey, someday I might want to do X. What do I need to learn? Or, how do I need to develop so that might be possible someday? And because really, each of us is responsible for our own growth and development, but your manager can help you if they know the directions that you want to grow in. And so that's a way to sort of open the door a little bit without saying, I want that job now. And, maybe being seen as, not being appropriate in whatever culture that you're in there.
Hey, Lynden, can I jump back in with a question?
Yes, go ahead. I see a couple. Yes.
Well, there's been a couple of questions that were submitted in advance, and also some in the chat, which is great. Thank you all for submitting the questions. And I'll probably get this wrong, Amy, because I'm trying to throw like 4 questions into one. But it seems like there's a general feeling that Autodesk hasn't paid as much attention to the construction industry as people might want or look for. Is that, I don't know if that's true or not, because I'm really not familiar with that sector, but the general gist of the questions is, when will Autodesk start addressing more in the construction industry? Anything you can share on that?
Oh, yes. So we did start that actually 4 years ago. And we have historically been, very excellent in design, but we definitely saw, as many did, that there was a huge opportunity to digitize construction. 40% of greenhouse gases come from, buildings and construction, and there's a lot of work that we can do to it's a target-rich environment for improvement. So we had some internally built software. This was about 4 years ago, and we did a series of 4 acquisitions to build up a pretty big portfolio in construction. So we also created a separate division. To your point, Lynden, about how do we foster kind of growth of new things, we created a separate division and basically gave them license to do things a little differently than the rest of Autodesk, if it was going to mean that they could really, fast track our growth in that market. So it's been a great experience. We followed a little bit of the Zone to Win book that has kind of informed some of our thoughts. Many companies try to birth new big businesses, like 3 of them at the same time, and that you just can't really, it's proven to not be successful. So we really decided we wanted to double down on construction, and we all are supporting that.
How about like infrastructure type construction? So pipelines and things of that nature. Do you also address that?
We do. We have a whole series of civil products as well, and infrastructure products that do that. And construction spans both horizontal and vertical. And so for us, we have design in both of those spaces, and also construction. We're more domain specific in the area of water. that's kind of if you think about all the different types of utilities, water is the one that Autodesk has decided we really want to invest in.
Yeah, particularly with all the water problems.
Lots of water problems.
So there's an interesting question, Amy, that's taking me back to the first part of this segment. And I want to go back because it's from someone I admire, right? So Jim McCormick in the audience is asking about a favorite course, favorite professor, taking you way, way back at Cornell that actually you think mattered in terms of the things you're doing now.
Wow, I have to think about that.
And you can say all of them. How about that?
No. The one class that actually I'll always remember is, I think it was Physics 101 in Phillips Hall, maybe. There were just so many.
Did you have any?
Sorry?
Did you have any intersection with Don Greenberg?
Only at Autodesk, actually. Because I took the electromagnetics classes as an undergrad. I didn't do graphics. And
Okay.
so actually right after I moved to California, the person sitting in the office next to me was Don Greenberg. And,
That's funny.
and he is renowned at Autodesk. I mean, he had a material impact on our software. Oh, gosh, I'm trying to think. Was Professor Eastman also at Cornell?
Yep.
Yes.
And this is Les Eastman?
Yes. So my
Yeah.
first day of work at GE in Syracuse, he was in the parking lot. He pulled up in a car next to me in the parking lot. So I think I knew early on I was always going to be having Cornell in my life one way or another.
You're always gonna be on notice. I see. Hey, so I wanna switch gears a little bit though to talk to some extent about the current state of work, especially in terms of diversity, but to also, I guess, talk about the future, right? So just to set this up a little bit. So one of the things we're proud of in the College of Engineering is that we've been at gender parity now for almost the last decade, and consistently so. And just for context, I remember interviewing one of my favorite alums, class of 1950, who told me that when she was here, she was the only woman in one of her departments in the college, and not the only woman in her class. She was the only woman in a 6-year period, right? So there was no one ahead of her, no one behind her. And so we've come a long way, first as a college, and then of course, as a discipline and a university, in understanding that any person, any study is in fact relevant for creating thought processes, diversity of thought in engineering. And there's a quotation that is credited to you that I found very interesting and would like to develop a little bit. So it goes something like this. Usually, even when we visit customers, I'm one of the only women, if not the only woman in the room. But it's always been comfortable for me as I'm speaking from a point of expertise and knowledge. Can you develop that a little bit? Because I really like that perspective.
Absolutely. For me, I think throughout my career, and I've coached a lot of people on this, like, you're invited to the table for a reason. And so thinking about kind of your knowledge or skill set, your ability to synthesize things for people, like there's a reason why you have a seat at the table. And so I would tend to, get some of my confidence in some very awkward situations where, I was the only woman most of the time. But knowing that I was there because I had sort of a base of knowledge or expertise, and that was, something that was valued by the room. And so a lot of it is about sort of quieting your your inner head, the voice in your head that's maybe telling you something different than what is actually the reality. And I often, when I'm helping people get, I guess, over anxiety around maybe a big presentation or, something important, is reminding them that, hey, you're here because, like, you earned this, and go and help, spread what you know for people so that you can help and assist them.
Now that's really important. And so I'm going to just fast forward a little bit now to earlier this year, where you were named among the top 50 women in tech. And according to the press release from the National Diversity Council that issued that award, it said the top 50 women in tech award honors tech professionals who are change makers in the area of diversity and inclusion. These individuals possess the highest commitment to growth and advancement of an inclusive community. And so what I like about that is that it puts a certain kind of onus on us that figure out how to succeed and thrive in those environments to create an environment that's actually more inclusive. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about the role you're playing within Autodesk in that regard.
I think a lot of that stems back to my leadership style. I have a very inclusive leadership style, a very transparent leadership style. I feel that the more that I can help people understand why we're doing something, the better off. And so that when we get the people together, making sure that I'm pulling out all the voices in the room to contribute to the conversation, making sure people feel heard. And then I am just by virtue of being a woman in my position, I am a very visible, as I'm sure you are, Lynden, a very visible example. And so I take really seriously that need to be a role model and to support others and to, demonstrate the type of behavior that I expect to see from others as well. And that includes, addressing difficult situations sometimes in meetings or, calling things out that where people might not be being their best selves and creating that inclusive environment.
And I'm assuming, Amy, now that you've got so much experience under your wing, that it's easier for you to call out that type of thing?
It's easier in certain environments with people that I know well, but it's never, it's never great to be, spoken over in a meeting or have someone, co-op your idea for theirs but I think for me, I think again, back about the impact I'm having on my industry, both the people in my industry and the great work we're doing, that gives me that's my purpose. And so I can address those other things when they interfere as needed.
I read an important story because I think, and you're right that we all are trailblazers in an interesting way, but I think we function in organizations. And one of the interesting, again, comments that are attributed to you was an episode where you were in a boardroom and someone didn't say hello or didn't acknowledge you. And so can you finish that?
Yes, I was in the boardroom. It was one of my first meetings, and an external consultant came in to give us an update on, I think, cybersecurity. And I think he assumed I was there to take notes or something, because he shook all the other board members' hands. He sat down and was about to start presenting. And I'm very grateful. The chairman of the board was like, time out, this is Amy. Let's set this straight. But and quite frankly, it had been a while since I'd sort of had that experience. So it was just a reminder that these things do still happen. And I think for everyone here, stepping in right away, if you see something like that, just like fixes everything. Otherwise, I would have been, thinking about that for the entire meeting instead of being able to focus on the important work we had to do.
Yeah, and I think that's, in my view, that defines the culture, right? So the leader took that initiative. It's important. So one of the, so I've heard it said that, engineering, great, you're diversifying more, good for you. But disciplines like CS, right? Disciplines that feed, people on the software side of enterprise software are not diversifying nearly as fast. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on, what you've seen, best practices, lessons, a place like Cornell ought to take to heart in terms of preparing students who can enter that sector and diversify it from the inside.
That's always a challenge. One of the things that I've seen more at universities than when I was there was more of the group projects and the group work and the multidisciplinary work. So I think that because that's how work happens once you get into the workforce. So, and for me, helping people navigate those situations where they're kind of, part of a team, have to influence, those are good skills that will help them probably not get discouraged when they're in their first few jobs and trying to navigate all of the many different things you have to navigate around a career. Because, you're going to be a microcosm of some of those experiences at Cornell, but then being able in some ways to debrief about them, talk through them and understand that, there's opportunities in the workforce to have a bigger impact on how work gets done.
Well, that's really good. So look, so I want to just open up things a little bit. And the M&A world is a big world, right? And we focused most of our conversation around Autodesk and your experience there. And I wonder if there's some bigger trends that you're seeing that our audience ought to be interested in terms of how that world is working. This kind of nexus between the small startup that entrepreneurs are so fond of doing and this acquisition world. So are you seeing any special trends there that you'd like to communicate to this group?
Actually, yes, there's one big trend that we're seeing in that a lot of our customers who either are building things or manufacturing things are trying to become software companies. Rockwell, Siemens has already done it, Schneider. They're looking to diversify, and software is a highly profitable business compared to when you're manufacturing things and you have these big supply chains and lots of raw materials and capital equipment. And so we're seeing a lot of acquisitions happening in that space, both from existing businesses and emerging businesses, as people are trying to figure out how to transform some of these older businesses. So that's one thing. And also related to that is this digitization and digitalization, where this works perfectly in construction. Even with the infrastructure bill that's pending, a lot of the, in order to get a lot of the capital, it's going to be required that you actually build digital infrastructure to support the ongoing operations and maintenance of, whether it's new transportation, new water facilities, because that's how we do better in the future, right? And we don't let things age and fall into disrepair, and we can save ourselves a lot of cost and resources that way. So those are definitely trends, and I think ESG is a big trend. Anything to do with environmental sustainability, a lot of those things are becoming much more mainstream, and companies in the last 3 years have really materially started caring about that a lot more than I've seen in the past.
And hopefully they'll continue to do. Hopefully they'll continue to do so.
I was going to add
what I see from our customers, they will.
I was going to add the word resiliency, right? Because I think there's increasing uncertainty about climate and so forth. And how do you build for the quote unquote unknown?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very true.
So Amy, we've got a lot of questions that generally hit the topic of innovation. So I'm going to try to touch on some of those now. So one is, I'm reading it right out of the chat. It says, Autodesk is one of the few companies that supports and invests in research in areas beyond its core business interests. Can you talk a little bit about how Autodesk approaches exploratory R&D?
Yes. So in addition to, say, in my organization, where we're doing innovation that's a little more, 1 to 4 years kind of going to impact our customers, we have within our office of the CTO, we have an actual research organization that looks at more like the 10-year, 15-year out aspects. So they do a lot of, like, they were doing, machine learning prototypes, 10 years ago, before the rest of the company was putting them into the products. So there's definitely some really good energy around, let's understand the current strategy, but then let's place some bets and some things that feel far-flung today and work on them and see how they might impact, the business in the future. And that's an area where, going back to the risk conversation, like, if you have to take risk there, because everything is not supposed to be successful. If you're doing, sort of broad exploratory research, you should have successes and you should have things where you learn and move on to something else. Otherwise, you're not really taking enough of the chance there. Yeah,
I mean, and how do employees take advantage of that? Like, how do they get permission to kind of go off the reservation a bit?
Well, we have 2 ways. So one, the research organization does partner with the rest of us, and they have a couple of steering committees from the business. And then we run this sort of internal incubation process where we act like VCs and we fund projects. We have pitch days every year, and then we pick a few projects that we think would benefit from kind of that incubation mentality and that sort of startup VC mentality, where you get funded to hit certain milestones. And if you hit those milestones, then we might fund you further. And again, that's another space where not everything should be a success. We should be learning, and we should be then, for the successes, we can then graduate them into the core business over time.
And do you quarantine them in some part of the company, or do they
We do.
intermingle with everybody?
So they get to, they
Wait a
get
second.
help.
Quarantine's a very bad word to use right now.
I know, sequester. How about that?
We protect them, or we ring fence them from the rest of the company. Yes. So technically they report to this incubation board, and not to someone like myself who might have, slightly different priorities. So they get the benefits of the rest of the company, but they get kind of this, run fast, experiment, pivot kind of mentality on a different time horizon. So we definitely have them, and we release them from the rest of their responsibilities and kind of put them in a special incubation pool. It's really fun.
And mentoring, right? You didn't say that word, but I assume you've got, not
Yes,
just.
they get a GC.
Yeah,
They get sort of like they get some of the coaching and kind of things you'd get if you were actually doing a VC funded project, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Oh, pretty
I mean,
cool.
Lynden, it sounds like it might be a lot of fun to work at Autodesk. Maybe we should go apply.
It is a lot of fun.
Well,
to
I'm
work on. And I've seen
thinking-
some Autodeskers in the chat already, so we have quite a few Cornellians at Autodesk.
Well, I'm thinking we've when things become safer, Amy, we get to have you back in person, because I think we've gotten better at Cornell. I would say that it started, in fact, with McGovern, right? And then there was some spin-off in Cornell Tech, and now back in Ithaca with the Praxis Institute, where we're learning how to incubate things. We're learning that ultimately it is not good enough to just patent stuff and write papers, that you've got to now marshal, shepherd things into the world. And so that incubation process, right, including what I call the software, the mentoring and so on, is really crucial.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've done with E@C is talk to graduate students about, the amazing work that they're doing. It's very hard to go from university to industry, and what are things that you can do to try to help make that leap? Because there's a lot of, I think, great technology that we can't always get access to just because the systems aren't as mature in that case.
I'm a bit of a sci-fi buff, and so I just can't help. I see a question in the chat, a comment. I've been using AutoCAD since version 1, right? And so we're in the era of AI and all that stuff, right? And so what's out there in terms of really cool things that are to come, that the person using version 1 just needs to stay tuned.
There's a lot. Part of what we're doing a couple things. We have a lot of telemetry on how people are using the products. So we're starting to do things like anticipate when someone's maybe is having a problem and offer them a solution before they even know that they're having an issue. Because I think, the human capital and the workforce, we need to help them be more productive across the board, whether it's, in construction or design. There's a lot that we can do with machine learning and automation that will help us to free up their cycles to do the really important creative work, as opposed to some of the monotonous type of work. So we're doing a bunch of things there. We have great projects going around in something called generative design, where you give the software a bunch of your constraints, and then it will go off and run a series of simulations and then come back with a bunch of different options. Our Fusion product in manufacturing does this quite well, and we've done amazing work with some of the car companies looking at lightweighting, and some of the airplane companies looking at lightweighting parts, because a human is not going to come up with some of the answers that a bunch of simulation given the right constraints would come up with. And then you marry that with things like additive manufacturing, and you've got really new ways of thinking and innovating.
A new world, yeah.
So Amy, the same person that asked that pointed out the quote that Lynden just read, also asked this question. And he's also asked a bunch of questions. I'm just going to focus on this one because it's short and I can absorb it. Does Autodesk automate alignment sheet, permit, plat drawings, and survey models for long-range construction projects?
So I don't actually know. I did
Pretty
see there's a
specific
lot
there.
of kind of capability related questions in here.
Yeah, yeah.
We have a pretty big portfolio. I'm not as expert on all the products and the details as I used to, but it is definitely, we build open APIs. We have another way to get to know Autodesk too is we have a huge third-party partner program where you can integrate with our tools, kind of leverage the data and enhance the data and add value in, different ways for customers. So there may even be third parties that do some of that automation that we haven't done yet.
And what if you had to name one area that you're most excited to innovate in as a company, what would it be? In just one, I know it's often tricky to give one, but.
Well, actually, I mean, for me right now, it's sustainability.
Yeah.
It's, carbon, water, all these sustainability things. It's sort of we have the technology to solve these problems. We have the intelligence to solve these problems, and we should go do the work.
Yeah. And knowing you for as long as I have, I know that means that it will be a long-term project and not just a trend or a fad.
So there's a nice question from Susan Chen in the chat, and it's what is there anything you would do over when you think of the full arc of your career?
Yes. When I was in the first 10 years of my career, I like many young people, I would get impatient with my employer. I wasn't learning, or I was bored, or what have you, and I would just I would go get another job somewhere else. What I didn't do was look internally to the company very often. And I think I missed out maybe on advancing faster if I had sort of stayed within a company and moved around and tried different opportunities. That's what I ended up doing at Autodesk. I've worked in 3 or 4 different kind of organizations within Autodesk, and that really accelerated a lot of my development. Whereas before, when you start a new company, there's always that learning curve and things. So I could have done a better job, I think, of scouting for internal opportunities while also looking for external opportunities.
That's interesting. How about blending corporate cultures when you buy a company?
Yes.
Can you speak on that?
It's so hard. It's now really part of our evaluation process to try to understand if we are going to have opportunities to merge 2 cultures that are fairly similar, or if we're going to have to run some serious change management around cultures.
Yeah, and how do you assess that? Do you have like a team of people and professionals that come in and do that psychological?
Tell. I mean, you can kind of tell if you really think about it. We have a pretty well-defined culture code, and oftentimes we'll share that with the founders.
Mm-hmm.
The other great thing that's happening now is, when we started Linneus, we weren't thinking about culture. I mean, this was 1996. We did not talk about culture. But
Right.
These days, when I talk to company founders, I have friends who started companies and they thought about the culture before they even decided what problem they were going to solve. So that is really refreshing. So there's a lot more explicit information about culture out there that you can use at least as a starting point. And I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. We should probably just touch on COVID quickly, how it's impacted Autodesk positively or negatively. I think the audience is curious.
Yes. So it's impacted us quite positively because it's accelerated the need to digitize for a lot of our customers. We had cloud-based collaboration products that were growing nicely. During COVID, they grew like 300%, and now we're up over 100% year over year on these products because they had to figure out how to work remotely. We're an architecture firm, they used to go in every day and go visit clients or a construction site, everything online accelerated quite a bit. And so that's helped our customers do amazing things because they were able to really navigate through the crisis fairly well also. And it's allowed us to start adding more and more value to those collaboration workflows as well.
Yep. And on the negative side, I mean, like remote work, did you get more efficiency out of people? Are you bringing them back in?
We're going to go with a hybrid approach where almost all of our jobs can be done remotely, but we would still like, people to be able to feel like they're part of a team and, get together periodically, but we're not calling everyone back to the office or anything like that. That's, I think, one of the benefits of our type of company is most work could happen remotely.
Right.
What I do hope though, is I hope that we don't go back to the way we used to travel. I mean, we used to travel, I used to fly halfway around the world for a 1 hour meeting, right? And so did the customer executives that I'm talking to. So I think we can all maybe, be a little more judicious in our use of airplane travel and go where we really go when we really need to be in person, not just because it's expected, and it's because I do think I've gotten more time in my life back without my commute to San Francisco, without, all the traveling I used to do. So I don't want to give all that up just yet.
Well, also it's better for the planet on the sustainability front.
Exactly.
People are
That's
traveling.
kind of what I was. Yeah. If it's really better for everyone.
And I've heard that, even things that you think are high touch, like inspecting a new plant, well, the combination of fast internet and drones,
Yes.
you can
And
do all sorts of
sensors.
things.
Yep.
Yeah, you
And
can like
sensors.
literally be there, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's a
Absolutely.
new
And
world.
yep.
It's a totally new world.
It is. And so that's been, I think the amount of innovation that was accelerated during COVID in our space was pretty high, out of necessity.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any problems with people that want to come back to the office, but there's no office to come back to? Like, I'll tell you why I'm asking that is I recently started coming back in. You can see I'm here today. And I'm at the point now where I actually like to come back in. Like I like being around the other people. I like seeing the students on campus. It gives me a little bit of energy. And I'm lucky that, Cornell is here and we're going full live and, it's really our mode of operation. But I know a lot of companies like yours are not because they don't need to, and it's cheaper if they don't. I'm curious whether people are going to be able to, get the, full satisfaction with remote.
Every in the Bay Area in particular, every company is taking a different approach to this. So
Yeah,
we have opened almost all our offices in the US. We haven't in some cases we might not need as much space in a particular office because people may only be coming in 2 days a week or something, but we expect to have an office presence and an office experience for the people who want it. I have some team members, as soon as we opened up the office, they were there 5 days a week. I have others who are trying to sort out like childcare and other things, and they can have time to figure out what works
Right.
for them. So we're definitely we thought we would have more people in the office sooner, but with the variant, we're definitely seeing more caution in coming in. And now in California, you have to wear masks indoors, so that's not that much fun to like go into.
Yeah. Well, and the same is true at Cornell too. I mean, when we're with other
When you're
people.
with other people, yeah. So it's complicated. It's certainly as a leader, I was not. This was not on my. The last 18 months was a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Lots of things and challenges that I hadn't expected.
And it continues, right? It's been quite a journey.
Yep, it does. But I'm grateful that, I've been following Cornell all along. So I have lots of friends with kids there, and it's great to see the university thrive so well through this crisis.
Yeah.
But it's thanks in part to technology, right? And modeling and all the nice things that models can do, coupled with data and using the data to improve the models. And so we're now at a point where we're cautiously optimistic. So we are testing as before, but the models suggest that we are probably in a good place with something like 96% of the campus population fully vaccinated. Right. So obviously there's quite a bit of national press on these so-called breakthrough infections that makes everyone nervous. And so we're being appropriately cautious there. But we're feeling good about the fall semester, that we're going to be able to give students a really strong residential experience that resembles what we've done in past years.
Nice.
Thumbs up to that.
Zach, I don't know if you know Jeff Kinder, another person on CEO staff with me at Autodesk. He's a Cornell alum, and he just dropped his son off there last weekend. So very
yeah, the traffic was terrible last weekend. So guess what? We are actually at the end of our hour. I know it's flown by. So much great content. Thank you both, Amy and Lynden, for joining us and sharing your insights with the Cornell community. I know that I really appreciate it, and I'm sure that everyone does that participated today as well. For our audience, just a reminder that our program today was recorded and it will be available again, on both the CEN live stream channel and the E@C YouTube channels. Those will show up in the chat box as well. Little public service announcement, our big entrepreneurship conference in November in New York City, which we call Eclectic Convergence, is coming up. We do plan and hope that that will be live and that the variant will be behind us by then. Of course, we're planning a backup plan for virtual if need be. So we hope to see you all there. We can put that link in the chat as well for the conference. We're going to end it, and just so you know, for everyone, it ends very quickly. Once our AV person turns the webinar off, we all go away. So thank you again for participating. Thanks for joining us, to the audience. Hope to see you on our next webinar. Amy and Lynden, thanks again.
All right, ditto,
Bye,
ditto,
everyone.
ditto, ditto. Thank you, Amy.
Okay,
Thank you.
talk to you soon.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.